Welcome to the Clearground Show. I'm your host, Dr. G, with a PhD. Boy, have we got an action-packed episode for you guys today. So first, we're going to start off with a couple of jailbreak stories. And when I say jailbreak, I'm referring to people breaking out of these COVID quarantine areas. From there, we'll break down some unsurprisingly surprising news about Omicron. After that, we're going to look into countries and how they're responding to Omicron across the board. And this is not surprising. It's not good. We'll also look into a couple of videos of people sort of motivating others to get the vaccine. It's not a good look, and we'll break those down. We'll also take a look at what the CDC has to say on boosters now that Omicron's out and about. And we'll take a look at some federal cases in the US that have some big implications on healthcare workers and federal contractors in the near future. We'll get to all that and much more, so let's dive on in. So we've got two quarantine jailbreak stories for you guys today. We'll start off with a shorter one first, and this one comes out of Australia. And this is a media release, and it says, Absconders, Center for National Resilience, Howard Springs. So basically, Northern Territory Police are searching for 3 people who absconded from the Center for National Resilience earlier this morning. That was at 4:40 a.m. The so-called perpetrators literally scaled the fence and fled the area. So I was under the impression that these camps weren't going to be forced, but if the police are literally putting out wanted signs and chasing people that leave the camps, seems forced to me. I don't know. But we'll check in on this story and see if these guys get caught and what happens when they do get caught. We'll go from one jailbreak in Australia to another jailbreak in Amsterdam. So this is a pretty harrowing tale, and it's taken from the BBC, so I'm going to read parts of it. It's basically a story, and we'll just go through it and see what happens to this couple. So the story starts off with Caroline Pimenta, who is the protagonist, and she tests positive for COVID-19 after landing at Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport on a flight from South Africa on Friday. So she was arrested by the military police on Sunday night on a plane about to take off for Spain. So Carolina is a Portuguese biochemist, and she's a researcher, and she just turned 28, so she's pretty young. And she was among the 61 passengers who tested positive. She had tested positive after the flight, even though she had already had a negative PCR test before boarding the flight. And her partner had a negative PCR test. So because the couple wanted to stay together, they were transferred to a quarantine facility, which was a Ramada hotel, and it was about 10 minutes from the terminal. Carolina was convinced she had returned a false positive, so she was trying to get another test to verify this claim. So here's where things start to get crazy. The couple alleges that they showed the negative results to the Dutch police and the local health team on site, and they insisted that they were told, if I were you, I would go. So they grabbed the nearest taxi and headed back to the airport and used those negative PCR tests they took before boarding their flight from South Africa to get on a plane to Spain. So the North Holland police spokesman told the BBC that until that point, they had no jurisdiction to hold or detain anyone for breaking quarantine. Now I'm quoting, however, when the couple left the hotel, the head of the security area took legal measures because of the threat to public health and ordered their mandatory isolation. So after the couple leaves the hotel, the local mayor arranges for the couple to be held under an emergency order, and that changed the status of their quarantine to be enforced. So just as the couple makes it on the plane and they're about to leave, the military promptly board the plane and arrest Carolina. So at this point, the couple is moved to a freaking tuberculosis hospital in the northern part of town, where they're told they have to remain in quarantine for the next 5 days, and that's the totality of their quarantine time. So here's a picture of that lovely stay in the tuberculosis hotel. A Dutch man speaking to the BBC says, and I quote, "It's bureaucracy all over. No one knows what anyone else is doing. Everyone is blaming everyone else. This is an absolute disaster zone and pretty terrifying. Hopefully the West gets its game together and, gets out of this rut." So with Omicron being the instigator of some of this COVID mania, let's hear what one South African doctor has to say about the symptoms.
Looking at the mildness of the symptoms that we are seeing, currently there's no reason for panicking, as we don't see severely ill patients. I also checked with the hospital, some of the hospitals in my area, and one of the biggest hospitals, they only have one patient currently that's COVID positive on a ventilator, and they don't even know whether it's COVID, it's Delta, or whether it is Omicron related. We acknowledge that it might change going forward. But the hype that's been created currently out there in the media and worldwide doesn't correlate with the clinical picture. And it doesn't warrant to just.
So at the point of this recording, what this doctor is saying is what's being seen not only in South Africa, but in Europe as well. So symptomatically, there's mounting evidence showing that these lockdowns, these travel restrictions from South Africa that many countries participated in was a little premature, but it gets even more embarrassing for these countries. Now, this news was reported in a bunch of news outlets. I'm taking CBS right now, and the title is Omicron COVID variant was in Europe before South African scientists detected and flagged it to the world. Oh yeah, this is going to be good. So Dutch health authorities announced on Tuesday that they found the new Omicron variant of the coronavirus in cases dating back as long as 11 days, indicating that it was already spreading in Western Europe before the first cases were identified in Southern Africa. Belgium and Germany joined in, also saying that sample tests confirmed the variant was in those countries before South African health officials alerted the world on November 24th to its existence. Omicron appears to have gotten pretty far already. I know we've heard that it's been in Canada, but Japan and France confirmed their first cases of the variant on Tuesday. You know, I really hate saying I told you so, but sometimes they really twist your arm, you know? So further down in the story, adding to the COVID mania, the CEO of vaccine maker Moderna was quoted as saying the existing vaccines may be significantly less effective against Omicron, telling the Financial Times, quote, all the scientists I've talked to are like, this is not going to be good, end quote. But most scientists are exercising reserved judgment and caution before saying, crazy inflammatory things, pointing to a lack of clear information and urging people to wait until current research yields real data from experiments on the variant. So all major Western vaccine makers, in addition to the producers of Russia's domestic Sputnik vaccine, have said they are already working on or ready to work on tailoring their formulas specifically for the new variant if it should prove to be necessary. And just for the cherry on top for COVID mania, we're going to take you to a quote from Mayor Bill de Blasio. Quote, we're telling you to get those masks back on now. It's smart to do. Yeah, I think we're all going to be listening to Bill de Blasio for smart things to do. All right. So before we go diving into countries and their responses to the Omicron variant right now, first we're going to go over this old story from The Atlantic that came out May 13th of 2020. So this story was basically championing Slovakia and their early on COVID response and how unified they were and how great it was that they were complying with the masking and the social distancing. So I've got two quotes from the paper, then we'll go look at the numbers. But the first one is the country in question, Slovakia. This is the nation with the lowest per capita death rate in all of Europe and the one that on Friday recorded its first day of no new cases since March. Remember, this is May 13th of 2020. So with that stat, the author boldly makes this claim. When this pandemic ends and when the reckoning over how the world responded invariably begins, Slovakia will likely be among those highlighted as a success story, whereas the United States, which was supposed to be the country best prepared for such a crisis, will be remembered as among those that suffered the worst. So first we're going to show just Slovakia alone and their daily new confirmed COVID cases per 1 million people. And as you'll see, it is way, way higher than it's ever been before. Now, as soon as we throw it up compared to other countries, you can see that actually right now, Slovakia has the highest 7-day rolling average of new confirmed COVID-19 cases in the world, with a 7-day rolling average of daily new confirmed cases sitting at just above 2,000 per 1 million people. Now, of course, no country's response is going to be perfect, and every country's made a bunch of mistakes. But what's important to take away from this is that journalists and high-profile media people are really skewing the situation and leading to bad policy decisions. They're turning regular scientific decisions into political decisions. It's a total mistake, and it's leading to this COVID mania. And so who knows if The Atlantic is going to go back and look at that piece and write another piece saying, yeah, we messed that up. Odds are they probably aren't. And they should. They should discuss their mistakes. They should discuss what we've learned, but instead we're doubling down on more COVID mania, and we're going to see that right now when we look at these countries and their responses. So first up, we'll take a look at Germany and Austria, and this comes from The Guardian. Germany's chancellor-to-be Olaf Scholz backs mandatory COVID jabs. The article opens up with Germany's chancellor-to-be Olaf Scholz supports making vaccination against COVID-19 mandatory. German media have reported as neighboring Austria is debating how to enforce obligatory jabs from February. So while this is happening in Germany, their southern neighbor Austria is announcing it's pushing ahead with plans to make vaccination against COVID-19 mandatory among its wider population from February after consulting scientists and legal experts. So the Minister for the European Union and Constitutional Affairs said, quote, "We didn't want a vaccine mandate, let me make that explicit. But 20 months on from the start of the pandemic, we are in a situation that is dramatic if you look at intensive care units at hospitals." They didn't want to have to take away these people's, decision-making abilities between them and their doctor. No, they just had to. They didn't want to, but they had to. So this part's rich. The Austrian government had to set up discussions because, quote, "Of course, it represents an intrusion into our basic and civil liberties," end quote. So I guess if it was a borderline infringement, we wouldn't need to talk about it. We would just, do it. But because it represents an intrusion into our basic and civil liberties just so blatantly, then we'll have to pull everyone in, we'll have to talk about it. And could they seem any more blasé about this huge infringement? This is crazy to me. So the end of the article discusses that a draft law will not be presented until the 6th of December, but several politicians have already signaled that vaccination would be mandatory but not compulsory, meaning no one would be forcibly injected. Anybody else catch that? It's going to be mandatory but not compulsory. How did they figure? I cannot wait to see them square this circle. So finally in Austria, they're debating, the constitutional lawyers that is, are debating the minutiae, who's it going to be mandatory for, over 14, over 12? But what they seem to know for sure is that those who refuse to be vaccinated will receive 2 warnings, followed in cases of non-compliance by an administrative fine of 3,600 euros, which would be issued twice. The government declined to comment on Tuesday about the details of the law mentioned to the press. Meanwhile, in Canada, according to the Toronto Star, unvaccinated travelers over the age of 12 won't be able to board a plane or train in Canada beginning today, and a negative COVID-19 test will no longer serve as a substitute for most people. So going into the government page, we can see some of the requirements that are going to be put in place now specifically for Canadians. So if we look at the unvaccinated children less than 12 years of age and the fully vaccinated travelers, look at some of the things they have to do. So when they land in Canada, they have to maintain a list of the names and contact information for each person with whom they came into close contact and a list of all locations visited. They have to keep a copy of the following and provide them on request to the government: all COVID-19 pre-arrival test results, all on-arrival COVID-19 test results, including results from random testing and results for children under 12, and proof of vaccine. So they really drilled down on the children that are unvaccinated less than 12 years of age. Take a look at this. So for 14 days after arrival, the child must not attend school, camp, or daycare. They can't attend a setting where they may have contact with vulnerable people, including people who are immunocompromised, regardless of that person's vaccination status or public health measures. So who cares what your vaccination status is? They can't travel on crowded public transportation that does not ensure physical distancing and masking. They can't attend large crowd settings, indoors or outdoors, such as amusement parks or sporting events, for 14 full days. This is absolute craziness. No one's going to travel. No one's going to travel with kids. You can't have your kid out of school for 14 days when they're otherwise healthy. According to ABC News, Greece is mandating vaccines for people 60 and older. The Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said Tuesday that vaccines for people 60 and older will be required. Any citizens over 60 that don't get their first appointment booked by January 19th are going to be fined. The nation's vaccination rate stands at 62%. The World Health Organization even joined in on the fray, saying basically that people 60 years of age or older, or those with comorbidities that present increased risk of severe COVID-19, should be advised to postpone travel to areas with community transmission, which is everywhere. Where isn't there community transmission of COVID right now? So according to the New York Times, Israel's spy agency is going to be able to track Omicron patients' phones at least through Thursday. The Israeli Domestic Intelligence Agency has been granted temporary permission to access the phone data of people with confirmed cases of the Omicron coronavirus variant in order to trace who those people met recently. The agency was given similar powers during earlier waves of the pandemic. Check out this crazy quote from a criminology professor in Israel. Quote, "We have indeed reached a point at which we do need a big brother keeping track of where we go." That's a big yikes. Wow. Of course, critics said that the move infringed on civil liberties and contravened a Supreme Court decision last March. The court ruled then that the agency could use phone data in this way only to track people who had refused to comply with contact tracing procedures. Quote, "No other democratic country has chosen to use its security service to track people." Adding, quote, "This is a terrible, illegal decision," end quote. So vaccine enthusiasts have come out of the woodwork to talk about how everyone needs to get vaccinated because of this new Omicron variant. First, let's take a look at Health Secretary Sajid Javid from the UK.
Have you got boosted yet?
No, I'm 64 and I've still not had it.
You haven't? Why not?
Well, partly because I got COVID at the Hartlepool by-election.
You should be okay now.
And so I didn't have my second till the 14th of June. So under the 6-month rule, that takes to the 14th of December.
But under the new rule, you'll be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
You come back here later this week.
Yeah. What time do they open here?
They open till 8, I think.
Oh, right.
In fact, they might give it to you now if you walk in.
You think so?
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to work though.
No, do it. Can you make me a promise?
Sorry?
Make me a promise. Just go and do it now.
I'll see.
Go on.
See if I can be back in the
Bonus.
office.
No, just I'll tell the office. You tell them. You go in. Do you want me to go with you?
Can I go and get my
No,
jab?
come on. I'll walk in with you. Come on. Let's do it.
Oh, gosh.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm calm. I'll do it.
How incredibly creepy. Just come get the vaccine. Oh, you're not ready yet? But the new rules say you are. So just come with me, come get it. This is literally the exact kind of peer pressure everybody when we were growing up in school told us not to fall for. They said, think for yourself, learn for yourself. Don't just listen to people because they say to do things. And here we are, this guy literally saying, come on, do it. I'll give you a bonus. I'll talk to your manager, whatever. Come on, just do it. It is really creepy. I wonder in cases like this where the health secretary just convinced some guy on the street to go do something about any culpability. So this could have been anyone. This could have been a young reporter. It was in fact this guy who was 63, but without consulting a doctor or physician or pharmacist on getting this vaccine or getting this booster, what if there was an adverse reaction for this guy? Is the health secretary culpable? I don't think he is. Just the way that it is, he just convinced someone to do it. It's weird. It's creepy. The fervor that people have for going to get this booster, it's a little unsettling. But not to be outdone in fervor, let's take a look at CNBC host Jim Cramer and how he's talking about literally getting the military involved to force a universal vaccine mandate.
Lord knows what happened if you didn't partake. But back then, anyone who refused to get vaccinated would get ratted out immediately because we knew that person could hurt other people. The commonweal was a commonweal. Now we're engaged in a similar struggle with COVID, and Eisenhower would be aghast. We have immunocompromised people who are incubators for every variant to come, walking around lawfully unvaccinated? That's psychotic. We have companies that have tried hard to get people vaccinated and now backing down. We have governors who want to be president by grandstanding on a foolish states' right issue, the right to get sick, get other people sick. So it's time to admit that we have to go to war against COVID. Require vaccination universally. Have the military run it. If you don't want to get vaccinated, you better be ready to prove your conscientious objector status in court. And even then, you need to help in the war effort by staying home until we finally beat this thing.
Now, I mention this every time, but it's so important. Jim Cramer doesn't name a metric. What's the end goal? He says we'll do this until COVID's over. Well, when is COVID over? There needs to be something concrete for us to achieve. Also, I don't think anyone has yet shown him the correlation between vaccines and cases. If cases are the metric for ending this thing, he might not like what he sees. We're going to round out today's episode by looking at the CDC's recommendation on boosters and a couple of court cases. So the CDC on November 29th updated their booster recommendations. Now they say everyone ages 18 and older should get a booster shot either when they are 6 months after their initial Pfizer and Moderna series or 2 months after their initial J&J vaccine, and they cite the recent emergence of the Omicron variant to emphasize the importance of getting vaccinations and boosters. Now, in a big win for healthcare workers across the nation, a Louisiana federal judge blocks the nationwide COVID vaccine mandate for healthcare workers, and this includes CMS. So before going into the article, here's a quick picture of the opening page for the ruling. Now, you'll notice it focuses on CMS, and I'm going to highlight this one section where it says failure to comply with the CMS mandate may result in penalties up to and including termination of the Medicare/Medicaid provider agreement. According to the CMS mandate regulates over 10.3 million healthcare workers in the United States. Of those 10.3 million, 2.4 million healthcare workers are currently unvaccinated. So this mandate had huge implications, especially seeing as we were coming into January 4th when it was due, and 2.4 million hadn't been vaccinated. I don't know if they would have at the last minute tried to get vaccinated to save their jobs, but if they didn't, that is a huge section of the healthcare industry that faced suspension or termination overnight, which would have been terrible for all the patients that rely on these people. So back to the article. A Louisiana U.S. district judge blocked federal COVID-19 vaccine mandate for healthcare workers Tuesday, issuing a nationwide injunction in another setback to President Joe Biden's efforts to require wide segments of the population to be vaccinated. So in the decision, Doherty, which is the judge, wrote that Biden administration doesn't have the authority to bypass Congress in issuing such a mandate. He wrote, and I quote, "If the executive branch is allowed to usurp the power of the legislative branch to make laws, two of the three powers conferred by our Constitution would be in the same hands. If human nature and history teach anything, it is that civil liberties face grave risk when governments proclaim indefinite states of emergency." This is an absolute win for healthcare workers. We know that the COVID-19 vaccine is good at preventing hospitalization and severe illness in high-risk patients, but it's not that good at preventing transmission, and these healthcare workers are needed right now. We should not be in the business of artificially lowering our healthcare worker count because of vaccine mandates. And finally, in some less good news, according to ABC, Biden is delaying the suspension of unvaccinated federal workers until after the holidays. So here's from the article. The White House Office of Management and Budget is telling federal agencies they should hold off on suspending or firing federal workers for not complying with the vaccine mandate until after the holidays, and that's according to a memo obtained by ABC News. The story goes further, saying 92% of federal workers have already had at least one vaccine dose, according to the Office of Management and Budget. The federal workforce's compliance rate stands at 96.5%, meaning employees have had at least one vaccine dose or have a pending or approved exception or extension request. Well, at least these employees can enjoy the holiday season knowing that they may or may not have a job come January. Now, if I had to guess, I would imagine that this takes a little bit longer than the private businesses and the CMS to change, but I think in the end, federal employees, just like CMS healthcare workers and private businesses, are not going to be mandated to have this vaccine. We went a little over in time, but we had so much news to cover. I want to thank you guys so much for listening. Remember, please subscribe and share. I want as many people as possible to listen to this. I love reasonable debate and reasonable conversation, and I think this channel provides that. So with that, have a great Wednesday. Enjoy this video, and I'll see you guys on Friday.
The wonderful world of crackheads this morning. Oh, okay, you're going to try to pick the whole fridge up. You don't want no help. You don't want somebody to get on the other side. You just going, okay. Crackhead strength is, where is you at when I need help moving? Always find you a crackhead to help you move, because they cheap and they do stuff like this. He gonna get on the, he getting on the bike with the whole fridge on him? Crackhead strength is real. He riding the bike with the fridge. You know how hard it is to pump the homie on the handlebars, but not for him. He carry the hose and it's full of food. Crackhead strength.